Do you want to know the truth?
Yeah.
Do you want to know the real truth?
Please.
Okay, this is
hit me with
this
the
is so upsetting.
deepest, realest
Okay,
truth.
cool. I'm going to tell you because it's so embarrassing.
Hello and welcome to Did I Do That? It's a podcast about making graphic design and, would you believe it, making mistakes. I'm already doing that because it's all part of the process. I'm Sean Schumacher, and joining me today, a very special guest. She's done design across the arts here in Portland, both at her undergraduate institution, the Pacific Northwest College of Art, and at Portland Institute for Contemporary Art, which, despite how its name sounds, especially right next to PNCA's name, is not a school. It's not a school. Please stop asking. 2016 me begs of you to stop asking that. These days, she teaches here at Portland State. I fucked up the name of the school that we're literally in right now. These days, she teaches here at Portland State University and is also going back to school herself in the graduate programs at PNCA in the MA Critical Studies and the MFA in Visual Studies programs. It's Mallary Wilson. Hi.
Hello. Hey, if it makes you feel any better, I can't even describe my own history without getting PNCA, PICA, and PSU confused. So you are not alone. I literally do it to myself all the time.
Well, the fact that I could not remember literally the space that we're in right now is maybe a low point.
Already been too full of the PNCA, PICA, PSU.
Everything here has to start with P.
I know.
There's no other options for names. Well, thank you for taking this lovely Saturday to be here in this windowless room.
I love it.
This terrible.
I'm so honored to be here. I love it.
So honored to be in this terrible
I love
space.
a podcast.
Well, you have the honor of being our first guest in season 3, actually recorded within the span of season 3.
I'm
because
so excited.
I believe both of my first 2 guests for season 3 were recorded, in one case, the same day as a season 2 episode.
Wow.
But
you're so busy.
Yeah, it's I needed some time there, and this was, I stole this technique from The Simpsons, so I'm stealing from the best. Of recording episodes for the next season to give myself a buffer in the preceding season.
Smart.
But yeah, so season 3 has officially launched.
Woo-hoo.
And a couple days ago, when I was about to post the first season 3 episode, I realized that there's a thing that I probably should have done well in advance, which is promote season 3 a little bit.
Hey, sometimes it gets really exhausting having to promote yourself. You know, I get that.
Absolutely. And, it's especially when you're a little out of practice with it, as I was. And last time that I did a season launch, I had the benefit of this is new show art, so I'll just use that.
Right. Yes.
So I was like, I'm not changing the show art. So what do I do? And so I quickly came up with the idea of maybe it's we'll talk about dropping the season. And so it's an image of a 3 dropping. And I leaned into the idea of it being in the show colors, which are fairly limited. They're beige and yellow and brown. And unfortunately, those 3 colors don't always work well in the abstract. And so I think I kind of started season 3 accidentally in making this image very rushed and then waking up the next day and looking at it with a little bit of a snafu. Because take a look at this image and tell me sort of what the vibe is of it.
Oh, that it's floating?
Well, that it's floating, but does the color evoke anything in you?
Yeah, I mean, it looks a little like a poop. This is so funny. I literally had this conversation with students. You have to make sure it doesn't look like a butthole or a penis or boobs.
Absolutely.
Constantly.
It's
just so easy.
If you're intending to do it, then it's good. But this was truly I woke up the next day to post the image for the next season episode, and I'm like,
dropping the deuce that is season 3.
Yeah, how many people are looking at this image and reading this as literally this new season's going to be shit? Which is pretty much the worst possible way that you could introduce a new season.
I don't know. I feel like self-deprecation is very in right now.
Yeah.
So maybe you're just on trend and you don't even know it.
I guess so. But it's it's also, I mean, it truly is the thing where it's not intentional. And I was just working I like literally this was made in an hour before I posted it, and I didn't even bother to think of like, well, maybe I should have flipped the colors.
Yeah, that's right. That's why you gotta sleep on it sometimes.
Yeah,
before.
And you can't change an Instagram image.
Nope.
It's truly frozen in time forever, a crystalline entity.
So now you have your theme of your season.
Horrifying.
I'm so honored to be a part of this.
Well, I mean, there's unfortunately that is going to factor into later season episodes, but I'll leave that until it happens. Mallory,
Yes.
so I appreciate you being here.
Awesome.
So what brought you here? How did you get to this point?
Oh, man.
What was your start of your design journey?
Oh my God. My start of my design journey, I mean, I've always been artistic. I've always like been a part of like the art world.
Yeah.
My mom is super convinced that I'm like an amazing illustrator and that I can draw. And I'm always like, Mom, it's different art school. I can't.
This is a problem that I have with my mom too.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Different kind of art school. I started school when I was like 19 in Wichita, Kansas at WSU, Wichita State University, which if you watch Ted Lasso is with the college that he is from.
That's where Ted Lasso's from?
Yeah.
Did you meet Ted?
I wish.
Oh.
That would be amazing.
He was already in
It was
the
like
UK.
1,000 years ago that I was 19. So I went for a year as a painting major. Legitimately terrible at painting. Discovered. Super cool.
That's a big problem.
Decided I really loved printmaking though, and I did intelligent printmaking for. I just like fell in love with that and screen printing.
What had drawn you into painting in the first place?
I didn't know what else there was.
Oh, you just wanted to do art, and that was
like
art on the top of the list.
Yes, I grew up in Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, and then moved to Kansas the middle of my junior year of high school. And so I wouldn't say that my tastes at the time were expansive. Little limited on my perception of the world and or what art was. And you know, like when you're a kid and you're in middle school or high school, like you get those cheap things of paint from the art store and you're just like, I am Picasso, you know, and you're just like, I am God's gift to this. And and then you're around people that are actually good and you're just like, oh wait, never mind. Like,
oh yeah, that's what hands are supposed to look
yes.
like.
Yeah, oh my God.
I've just been making hands like the AI.
Yes.
Except
like,
worse.
Exactly. Oh my God. Yeah. And so I went to school there for a year, was so terrible and couldn't finish.
Oh.
I dropped out. I just, you know, I've always had trouble with school. I always like I had tutors in high school. Like I was not great at like the standard way of doing work. It wasn't that I wasn't like smart or that I didn't try. I just had a really hard time like memorizing stuff and then like regurgitating that.
Well, that's such a different like brain space than I feel like a lot of creative people are able to work in.
Absolutely. And so I was just kind of like, oh, I'm not smart enough for college. Like, that's never going to be me. And so I dropped out and then entered the like working world, like right when I turned 18. And it was my first job. I've had so many weird jobs, which honestly, I really feel like makes me a better designer.
Oh,
honestly,
absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
The people that I could talk about this for so long, but like the people that I see that go like straight from like college to like whatever job they're doing.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know how like in Israel they like require you be in the army for 2 years?
Well, that's like, I think most countries have
which I
something
mean is terrible.
like that.
But I think that everybody in America should be a part of the food service industry for 2 years, like just as a requirement. So like that you know how to treat other people better.
Yeah.
And that you know how to like treat people in that industry.
Absolutely.
So I've had a lot of like really crazy jobs. And so then moved to Portland when I was in my 20s and just was working. I worked at coffee shops. I was a manager at a coffee shop for years and then started bartending.
What brought you out to Portland? Was it just like wanting to get...
Do you want to know the truth?
Yeah.
Do you want to know the real truth?
Please.
Okay, this
is hit me with the deepest, realest truth.
Okay, cool. I'm going to tell you because it's so embarrassing. I was raised fundamentalist Christian.
Oh.
Like Dirty South, man. Like I lived in the Bible Belt. And I was fully a part of that culture. Like I want so hard to be like, I knew from the get-go that this wasn't me. No. I was full on hardcore Christian for a long time. Up until like literally I think I was about 22.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I got married very young when I lived in Kansas. And my then husband and I moved out to Portland to go to a church.
Really? A
Yes.
specific church out here?
Yes, it's so this was saying. Nothing about my past is cool. Like I am.
That's
Just
true of most people, though.
unforgivably
Yeah.
uncool. Yeah, and so moved out here, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh wait, life exists past the Midwest and the South.
Yeah.
Literally, we got divorced the next year.
Wow.
Yeah, and so then I was on my own for the first time and started working, and just that's kind of all I did. I was like, this is my life, and then started bartending, which I loved. I'm pretty sure I peaked as a bartender. I'm not gonna lie.
You have an amazing personality for a bartender.
Yeah, it's true, and I think that's why I feel like I kind of peaked, because when you have like really bad concentration issues and you can't focus on anything, you can do 12 things at once very successfully.
Absolutely.
That's
but
why...
you also have, I feel like I want to tell you all of my secrets just right now.
Oh, that happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I did not know how to filter that. I'm not kidding. When I first moved to Portland and I was on public transportation for the first time,
Oh, no.
I mean,
you don't want their secrets.
No, like people that would literally be sitting next to me, like businessmen, would turn to me and start talking.
What?
And I would just be like, it's something on my face that says, please tell me your secrets. It happens to me all the time.
What? That's
all the time.
wild.
It used to drive my mom nuts because it happened when I was young, like really young, and she would have to be like, "Please stop talking to my child." Like, so I don't know what it is.
Don't tell my child your secrets.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what it is, but so as a bartender, yes, I learned many a secret, and you see some crazy shit bartending.
Yeah, for sure.
And so there's really there's kind of a lot of overlap between bartending and teaching.
Yeah.
I just try not to swear as much, but which I'm not successful at. But yeah. No, and so I just decided at one point that I was like, well, I don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I worked, and my husband had 2 years left of college. My now husband. We've been together for 16 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's been a minute.
That's amazing.
He's amazing. He's the best. But he had gone to 2 years of college and then went back. And so I worked and put him through school, and because with bartending, you can make that money.
Yeah.
And then he got his job and started working at Nike, and I was like, man, he's making that look good.
Yeah.
I, at the time, was working 3 to 4 days a week. And for bartending, 4 days a week is a lot.
Yeah.
5 days is considered it's like would be working like a 50-hour week.
And that would really, especially those hours,
yes.
too. That's going to wear
It takes a toll on your body and your brain.
Yeah.
For sure. Between working at a coffee shop for 10 years and then bartending, I never had, my circadian rhythm just does not exist.
No, you
so fucked.
Smashed it completely.
No, completely. I was either getting up at 4 a.m. or leaving work at 5 a.m. So
no good.
Yeah,
no
yeah.
good.
So,
Both
the
options
lifestyle
bad.
of that, yeah, I was like, maybe I'm not in my 20s anymore. Maybe I should look for something else. And I decided on graphic design because I was like, I want to do art, but not. I want to get paid.
Yeah,
that's
fair.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have that mentality about it, even though you can get paid as an illustrator and artist, of course. But I was never really good at it, and so I was like, I'll just do this then. And I just decided I had no clue what I was doing. I had no idea. I say that to people, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. I was so bad. So bad. I just really, I know we were talking about this earlier, but I just did not understand a lot of the art school culture.
Yeah.
And I was 32. I never thought about my age either until I went back to college, and I was just like, holy fuck, I'm old. I have a really embarrassing story about that too.
But you came here, I should also say. You came to Portland State.
Yeah,
Portland
the first year I came here.
Yeah.
And literally had never opened a document in InDesign. I just remember when they were like, okay, do this, and I was like, how do you turn on the program? I was so bad.
Oh no.
I was so bad. And just because I was very overly confident. As a bartender, I was crushing it.
Yeah.
Crushing it.
Absolutely.
And it's just such
that's just moving fast
yes,
and
yes. And it's just such a different environment, such a different culture. Oh my God, I did not understand critique culture at all.
Oh no. Oh no.
I feel like I owe so many teachers here an apology for my sophomore year. Because like some teachers were chill and were just like, you need to calm down. Like, because I thought it was like, well, I'm going to do this and I need to go up there and defend my decisions.
Yeah.
I did not.
No.
Yes.
Oh no.
Yeah. And coming from bartending, being a relatively aggressive person, that I was just like, I thought I was really supposed to be like, stand by your choices and then like, listen, if you like what people say, then you can change it. And I finally had a teacher, my typography teacher, Kimberly Sutherland, who is a creative director, I believe, at OMFG Co.
Yes.
Now. Oh my God, she saved my life. Like, I'm not kidding. It was her first year too. She had never taught at PSU.
Oh.
And we were her first class.
So she probably still in the graduate program.
Yeah, she was. It's funny because she didn't even know what portfolio was, and we were talking to her about it, and she was like, I need to go redo my syllabus. She redid her syllabus in a day.
Damn.
Yeah, I know. So that
yeah.
she could like help us out with projects, and she really got me through that semester, because I just remember talking to her once being like, I'm not coming to class, I'm too frustrated, and she was just like, just come to class and we'll work it out.
Yeah.
And so she was very much like, I feel like maybe you're coming at this from the wrong angle, maybe you should just listen. Like, so I learned a lot from her. But yeah, I was so bad and worked really hard and made good grades and was like, I'm going to do sophomore portfolio. I'm not going to listen to Breyer's advice at all. And who was that's
going to be a problem because Breyer Levitt, famously very good at knowing design.
Absolute genius.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know anything about this culture. I don't know anything. I'm going to do all the classes and portfolio, because she was like, maybe you shouldn't do all of this in 1 year, considering you have no experience. And I was like, no.
Yeah, what was your course load like?
I took 5 classes my freshman year, or my beginning of my sophomore year, and then 4 for portfolio, and I was working full time.
No.
Yeah, so bad.
You shouldn't do that.
Learn from my mistakes.
That's rough.
So bad. And just a lot of it came down to me not understanding the workload and the culture.
Yeah.
And so I worked really hard, and my grades were okay, but this is when portfolio you had to print it out.
Yeah. Back in the day.
I spent so much money on that thing, thinking that like another mistake is like, well, if I pay for this and make it look like really fancy and cool, then it's gonna they're never gonna deny me. I got a 1. I failed.
No.
I failed so hard.
Yeah.
And it wrecked me because I didn't know what I was gonna do, and I was like, this is a sign. I should not go back to school. But my mom swoops in, and who also went back to school when she was in her 30s, and she failed algebra 3 times. So she took the class 4 times. And she was like, honey, if I can fail 3 times and keep going, so can you.
Yeah.
I actually do this thing for my students. I have this jar of erasers, like really cute, funny erasers that I'll give out. It's kind of like, nobody likes to sit and listen to a lecture for 2 hours.
Are these erasers shaped like food items, perhaps?
Yes, they are.
I also collect these.
Yeah, I should have brought you some. I like give them out to my students as they participate, so they can participate in class. And so like if they answer questions, especially tough questions, they get an eraser in honor of my mother, who when she finally passed her algebra class. She's still alive, by the way. It makes it sound like she's not. She's alive. She's kicking ass.
She finally passed.
No.
Ellipses. Her algebra
Yes,
class.
exactly. She almost failed the 4th time, but her professor was like, I'm tired of seeing you here. You've done a great job. I'm going to give you 2 bonus points on your final so that you can pass. And so she did. And so,
but she was that close.
Yes. So in honor of my mom's struggle and her perseverance, if my students hold on to those erasers at the end of the term, they can turn it in for 2 points on one of their big projects.
That's really smart. That's really smart. I'm stealing that.
Yeah, you should. Oh my God, please do.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I failed, and I failed hard, like so hard.
Yeah.
And I was still working I was still bartending, and I was like, well, somebody suggested maybe you should apply to PNCA. And I was like, man, if I can't get through portfolio at PSU, I'm not going to use that portfolio to try and get into another school.
Yeah.
Because I was just like so awash in my own misery and self-pity.
It's gonna weigh on you no matter what.
So luckily I have just an amazing group of friends and family and support system, and they were like, cry about it, get up, dust yourself off and get back to it if it's what you really want. And so I really had to make the decision, like, is this what I want? But I fell in love with it while I was participating in it. And then, like, I just wanted to succeed out of spite, like,
it works.
Spite fuels me. Like, and so I was like, well, I have
Spite
to keep going
fuels
now.
everything
Yes,
around
that's
me.
right. Like, so I was like, well, now I have to keep going because I can't just accept the failure. I'm too stubborn for that. And so I applied to PNCA and I got in, and I got like a huge scholarship there.
Oh, nice.
And so that was the defining moment for me where I was like, all right, let's do it. And so then I went to school there for the next, I repeated my sophomore year there and went for the next 3 years. And
did you feel like going in there that you'd learn some lessons about, especially critique, but also like how to approach this in a different way that was maybe healthier and more sustainable for you?
Oh my God. And one of the things that we talk about this as graphic designers, like I tell my students this all the time, like you will never not be critiqued.
No.
It doesn't matter what you do. Like you will always be critiqued.
Yes.
And one of the biggest things that I try to teach them is like understanding what to keep with you and what to be like, okay, maybe no.
Yeah.
Like you can learn that over time. And like critiquing isn't just about like telling other people what you don't like about their work. It's also understanding the why behind what you don't like and what you do like, or what you think is successful and unsuccessful. And I did not understand that at first. And so I really had to sit with, like, you just have to like scoop out your ego for a little bit. And,
yes, that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, and just like let your failure be a companion, not an enemy.
Yeah.
And there's a really horrible, wonderful quote that was by a long distance runner that runs like 200 miles at a time. And he said, if you make friends with pain, you'll never be alone.
Whoa.
I know, which is like so intense, but also makes me feel so much better like about life. And then like that is true. Like it is true. And so like the things that we tend to push against so hard, especially when it comes to critique and ego, and like you have to have enough ego scraped together, to like form a personality and like stand up there and present your work, but not so much that it keeps you from listening to other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I cannot stop thinking of, and this is a terrible, terrible thought that's popped into my mind. Like Batman, if Batman got like that vinyl that you can get at like a home goods store, and it's in those terrible script fonts that they use, but it says, "When pain is with you, you're never alone."
Yes. so brooding.
I love it. It's really made the guest room a lot cuter.
It really ties the room together.
Homey in here, but in a dark way.
Yes. Oh my God. It's so real.
I'm a creature of the night, but also there's this lovely little lamp here that's providing such a warm glow.
Hey, we all need our aesthetic.
Absolutely. Hashtag aesthetic.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I really had to figure out what parts of my ego I was going to keep and let go.
Yeah.
And, I've done that a few times in life. I'm a Scorpio, man. I sometimes, I think especially as for like women too, sometimes when you're in positions of leadership or you find yourselves in an environment like being a manager or bartending, like you have to be a little bit overly aggressive in order to keep to get the same respect that other people do. And so I really had to reassess the idea that like that is a tool, but I don't need to use that tool all the time.
Yeah.
And I say this to my students constantly. They're so sick of hearing me say it, that like everything you learn is a tool, but like you don't want to fix a hole with a hammer,
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like understanding that like I hate this tool, I don't like learning this tool, but I don't have to know it all the time, but when I do need it, it's going to be there for me. So yeah, I had to kind of figure out some new tools in my tool belt, and it took me a long time to let go of some of my ego when it came to making work and
building that wall of separation between you and the work is one of the hardest parts.
Because it reminds me of the like Erin Brockovich movie when she's like, "That's my work. That's my time away from my kids. If that's not personal, I don't know what is."
Yeah,
I don't have children, but I want to spend time with my husband and my Switch, and like I'm like having a life.
And you are constantly trying to clean up that waterway that has been polluted by some company. I think is the plot of that movie.
Yes. It is the PG&E. Yes, you are correct. But it kind of feels like that, And so when I went to PNCA, I had really amazing teachers, and I think of like Bijan Berhimi, who owns Fisk. I had the absolute like honor of having him for more than 1 year, because he was teaching sophomores and then moved up to teaching juniors as we moved up.
Oh,
so we had him for like a year and a half, and he really taught me a lot about ego. And I just remember one time at critique, he was like, why are you trying to not do critique during critique? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, why are you trying to make it seem like what you have is finished? And I was like, I know it's not finished. And he was like, no, I know that, but you really seem like you think it is. And so I really had to reevaluate, how I was being perceived.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times in my mind, I was like, I'm not being argumentative. I'm just curious. I need to know why you think something. But it really came across that I was arguing. And so sometimes other people's perception is more of a reality than how you think you're coming across. And so I had to really think about that too, and modify my behavior a lot.
That must have been a very hard conversation to have, like thinking about it from the teacher side.
Oh, I'm sure. That's what I'm saying. I've said so many apologies to him.
But that's like, it sounds like that is so valuable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And to think that you're still thinking about it.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, I think about stuff my teachers say to me all the time, even the bad ones, even the really horrible things that were said to me, that I've had to have full on just like exorcisms to get their voice out of my head, like, because I just can hear them telling me that I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And
I'll forever be haunted by one of my teachers in undergrad who just, his method of critique was either saying this is working or this is not working, and not really give you much of a sense of what is not working.
Yeah. I mean, I've had teachers straight up look at me and be like, maybe you should just never do typography. Like that is, and now I teach it. Now I teach typography, and because, there's a point to where like you just can never let somebody tell you what you're capable of, especially if it's in the negative.
Yeah. But then you also have to do the work
exactly. But you actually have to put in the work. And, this brings me to, that we're talking about failure and about like, my failure at PSU first. Now it's all come full circle and I teach here. Like, it's so wild. When Kate was like, here's, this job. And I was like, are you sure? Like, do you know I failed portfolio? Like, she was like, no, it's a great story. I love it. And I was like, it is a good story.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny how it's come full circle.
But I think that's true of a lot of folks that teach here. Like, ultimately, sometimes failing portfolio review the first time ends up being this chance for folks to do exactly what you did and like reassess and like figure out what you actually want out of this, and
and like
get way better
and
too.
and understand that like I had to get better, and it's funny too because now thinking about there's such an interesting conversation that happens with my students, with other people that aren't a part of graphic design at all, about if something like art is so subjective, how can you figure out what is good, quote unquote, and bad? And like where does this canon come? Where's the canon that you're comparing everything to? And so that's why I tell my students, like, read the brief, please. Because it might look awesome, but it's not completing the brief. So
and that's the thing about portfolio review too, is it's really like, here's the list of skills that we are looking for. Show that you have skills in all of these areas. It's really that simple.
And it's funny too because I can't tell if it's just because I'm like have this underlying bitterness because I failed, but I do find portfolio to be a struggle. Just getting my students to turn anything in right now is such a pain.
Well, this is really the silly season in terms of like, we are, as we record this, we are a week away from portfolio review submissions.
It's due next Thursday.
So less than it's 5 days.
Yeah,
that's wild.
So but there is this interesting conversation that tends to happen about what is considered good, what is considered bad, what is considered successful and not. And so one of the things that I tell my students a lot is that like there are cultural norms within a certain, like, graphic design has its own cultural norms about what is considered good and bad. But that modulates over time. So much. And like
radically.
Yes. And now because of the internet and like our exposure to so many other things, like that time frame changes. We can see it change in real time. And as opposed to when it used to be like generations of things. We see this with fashion right now too. I talk a lot about the intersection of fashion and graphic design because fashion really does influence so much of design. And like those things are almost collapsing in on each other, like those cycles.
Yeah, well, and
which is fascinating.
I was thinking about this. Like, I feel like it used to be that one of the big shifts would be when there was a technological change, and we've almost gotten to the point where there's probably still going to be technological change that we don't expect.
Oh yeah.
But
I mean, AI comes to mind. Yeah.
Yeah, that is going to be a big one for us to figure out. But if anything, that's going to just completely make it even more into these little tiny pockets of things. Whereas like now we have at least the technology to kind of do anything. You want to do grunge typography.
Totally.
You can achieve it.
Yeah.
It won't look as good digitally as if you were doing it, with paste up. Yeah. But like you can do it. Just the same as you can do Swiss modernism.
Yes, totally.
And it's all the same tools.
And this is where I talk about in my class a lot, that like if you have anti-design, right, which is kind of what we're talking about,
Absolutely.
Like this like push against the standard, which I could talk about like in its own podcast, but you have to have the standard for design to exist in order for the anti of something to exist.
Absolutely.
And so like if you don't have that, they have to exist together.
Yeah.
Even though they are contrary to each other. But like you can't have an anti something if the thing it's anti doesn't exist.
Well, and that was something that I feel like I picked up really late in my design education too, because like at the very end, I started taking art history classes because, of course, I left those to the last minute. I'm the same as you all design students. But like one of my art history classes, one that was really valuable, was we went to a museum in town after hours, and we would just sit in front of two paintings, and they had a show of Picasso, weirdly enough. Yeah. And a lot of what they would talk about is like, actually Picasso was like a really good representational painter first.
Oh yeah, totally.
And that's why he was able to make that shift.
It's like Mondrian. His like reality depictions are amazing, but he's like known for his like square, like flat, like color blocking squares.
It's like you almost need that foundation in like knowing all those skills before you can get into the other thing and really understand what it is that you're riffing on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's honestly one of my biggest critiques about portfolio in general, is that I think that a lot of times students really struggle with learning some of the basics, and then also creating at the same time. So it's a little bit like learning scales when you're trying to compose music. But yeah, that's so interesting that, exactly. So you have to know the rules to break the rules, kind of a thing, but I find it fascinating in the way that not just my students, but the way that like people that I know in the graphic design world approach failure or success can also be very similar to how people approach like just hating on something or thinking that if you like something, it's not an opinion. I don't know if you've run into this.
I absolutely
okay,
I have.
Yeah, because like I've talked about this too, especially from like the female perspective of oftentimes femmes, when we are like excited about something or enthusiastic about something, it's seen as like indiscriminate. That's like, oh, well, they just like everything, and so you don't have an opinion. But I feel like you can hate on something, and that's way easier to do.
It's so much easier.
You can shit on stuff all the time and like just never even have an opinion.
But it has the feel to people of having more substance, even though it's often so much less substantive.
Yes, and it seems that like there is this like sort of like intellectual superiority if you are just shitting on people's work. Or if you're like, I only like this style. This is the only style that's relevant because somebody told you that it was cool.
Yeah, and that that's such a trap, unfortunately, that especially folks who are new to this field will get into.
And like nothing is above critique, I don't think. And so, which sometimes I guess makes me sound argumentative. Oops, there it is again. But I mean, I put myself in this category. Like as teachers, like we hear critique all the time from students, and like in a good way, it makes me a better teacher. And unless somebody's like, well, I just hate everything. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't.
Yeah, there's no way to really engage with that.
It's the same way as being too centered on things. If you are too afraid to give an opinion, you have no opinion.
Yeah.
If you love stuff too much and you're completely like, I mean, I feel like all extremes of that. Like if you're just hating on everything all the time, if you're just obsessed with everything all the time, like it tends to all just come out the same in the wash. And so I think that there's something about being able to articulate the why of like, I love something because of this. And sometimes you can love it just because it looks sick. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? But
That's valid.
That's valid.
But it's good to also have more reasons. Too.
Yes, it is. Exactly. And I think a lot of times you don't have the same awareness of how to describe your likes and your whys without having experienced failure.
Yeah.
Like, I really think you have to go through, like, oh, somebody disliked my stuff so much that it cost me something, or I overestimated my ability so much that it cost me something.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that's a really difficult place to land. I did this speech once. This is actually really embarrassing, but I did a speech about failure, and I was talking about failing portfolio.
Was this at
This
PNCA?
is a PNCA, yes. And I was talking. It was the Fuck Up Nights. Have you ever seen the Fuck Up Nights?
No, but
oh my
it
God,
sounds
they're
right
so
up my alley.
awesome. You would love it.
Oh
They're-
my God.
It's like a touring, like they do it in all different cities. And so they asked me to speak at this, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so honored. And then I was like, wait a minute, why am I always being asked to talk about failure, man? Like,
Oh no, I've continued the cycle.
no, it's actually it's so great though, because I really claim it, because we all fail.
Yeah.
And like you said in the beginning, it is part of the process.
It is.
And it like fear's the mind killer, right? Any Dune fans? I am so not afraid of failure the way I used to be.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and so it really does help you like become fearless. But I was talking about the first time I went to Wieden Kennedy, and I was just like in awe, and I was like, this is just like the pinnacle of what I think working in design field would be. And I saw
it does feel like some sort of weird like advertising theme park.
I mean, theme park, absolutely, yes. But it was like, I'm like, this is my kind of weird. I can get into this, you know, like I like this. And also I was like a sophomore. And so I saw the wall that said fail harder.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? And so in my speech, I was talking about how I hated that, because I feel like a lot of people don't get the opportunity to fail and keep going. And, you know, there's a lot of demographics that feel like I can't fail the way that you can as a white woman, because you get more options than I do. And so I have to be perfect all the time. And that's all I can think of. And I'm just sitting there just like shitting on this wall in this speech. And the guy that did the wall is sitting in the front row.
Oh no.
And I didn't know that at the time.
No.
But he was actually really cool about it. He was like, I appreciate your take. He did not have to be so nice. So, you know, I failed a lot. But I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, especially in sticking with something, knowing when to stick with it, knowing when to let something go. Like if I had failed algebra 3 times, I feel like I would have been like, the universe is telling me to stop, you know?
Yeah.
But like my mom's perseverance got her to a point where it gave her this new life. And so I think that it can be, one of the hardest lessons to learn, and why I think college in and of itself is important versus just like learning something on YouTube, because like, I mean, let's be real, graphic design is not brain surgery.
No.
You know, like
No, and there's a lot of great creators out there making
have never gone
great
to school.
design tutorials.
Exactly. And like I know people that never went to college
Yeah.
that are professionals that could absolutely design circles around me.
Oh, absolutely.
Like hands down. But for me, for me and my ability to process and understand, especially like the culture around graphic design, I had to be a part of it, and I had to have people kind of handhold me and explain to me why certain things are not something you should be afraid of, like failure.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that I always, whenever I talk about failure, I always have to put it in the terms of like, I am allowed to fail more because being a white woman, I get that privilege, and other people do not have that privilege. And, you know, I talk about that a lot. I went to my students too. But yeah, like it is one of those things that nobody likes it. Don't get me wrong. I hate it.
No.
It doesn't mean I'm not going to cry about it. Like
Absolutely.
or get like really mad. But I also will come back around and be like, okay, yes. And the more experience you get and the older you get, the smaller that time of like, ooh, it stings, the shorter that time gets. And the more you can appreciate like other people's perspectives on you, because it makes you a better person.
Yeah.
You know, because if you're only thinking, if your mind is your limit, like your brain is your limit, then that's it. You're never going to see anything past that. And so I might not always love to hear other people's critique of like my work or my life. But you know, it's another skill you have. You start to learn like, do I need to take this to heart or do I need to tell this person to fuck off? You know, like, but it's true in the land and like the time of the internet troll. We talked about this, like how to not be an internet troll.
Yeah.
Like,
it's very important.
I think it's very important to be able to say like, having expertise is important.
Yeah.
Because I am not going to sit there and tell. I'm terrible at illustration. I am so bad. Like when I have some students and I just look at their work and I'm like, yep, that looks awesome.
Yeah.
I got nothing
Seems
for
good.
you. Yes, because
Good
I just
lines.
don't know enough about it. And I'm just like, that's amazing. Like, so I'm never going to look at somebody that's like an illustration major or that has been doing this their whole life and has a ton of experience. Like, I'm not going to shit on their work. Like, I know what is going to make it good. I can say, like, I don't like that. It's just my opinion. And this is the philosophical conversation my husband and I were having last night, that, like, what's the difference between opinion and taste? And, like, how do you differentiate someone's... Because we often say, like, oh, they have good taste. Or, like... oh, that is a particular taste. It's not mine.
Yeah.
You know, but like, what is the difference in those opinions versus like somebody's opinion? And my thought was like, I think it's expertise makes taste. And when opinion and expertise come together, you get someone's taste for something.
Yeah.
There's so much there. That's like such a convoluted topic, but
it's so complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm thinking about like, it's so hard because I like the expertise part of that too is like, so there's so many lenses to
yes,
be
it's so
an expert
loaded.
on
Exactly.
this. Like,
yes.
you know, there are people in this field that are way more academic and they're coming
totally.
at it from an academic
Yep.
perspective of like, in a way, design is like more of an art form
Oh, yes.
to them.
I agree with that.
But that's
Yeah.
also like not practice
Right.
for the most part.
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
Most of this industry occurs not in academia,
No,
but in
not
the
at
field.
all. Well, and we, teaching typography too, we talk about like there are so many very specific standards for type.
Yeah.
And then there is this like anti-design kind of type that's happening, and
Yeah.
that specifically comes from, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, but I believe that our move towards this move away from Swiss design to almost like we don't even care if some stuff's legible anymore.
Yeah.
I truly believe that this comes from the racism that surrounds typography.
Oh, sure.
Because like if you are keeping literacy, like typography is literacy, right?
Yeah.
If you are withholding literacy from groups of people and basically saying you can't sit with us, you go over here and we're going to make all of these standards because if you can't meet that, then you're bad.
Yeah.
And you other people so hard to the point to where you have let no other cultures participate in what typography looks like now.
Yeah.
That like they are like, great, we don't want to sit with you anyways. We're going to go make our own stuff because your stuff is not cool. And we're going to make really cool type and it's going to be awesome. And then everybody over here is like, wait a minute. We kind of want that too.
Yeah.
You know?
That's the stuff that reinvigorates the field every,
exactly.
Every
But the
decade.
same thing has happened in fashion. And this is why I talk about like fashion and design being so linked, is that like high fashion, very specific for a very long time.
Yeah.
No one can sit with us. We are the pinnacle of this. And then people are like, we don't want to sit with you. Like we want to do our own thing. And then street fashion happens.
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden you see street fashion in the runway. And you're like, wait a minute. This pattern is repeating of like... We're over here othering everybody and saying our standards are the only thing that matters, except that when we see that, we're like, wait, that's so wrong because we also want that too. And so now we see typography changing just the same way we saw streetwear becoming high fashion and like all of these things because we haven't quite figured out how to interact outside of this like kind of like perpetual like racist issue that we always will deal with in America. And I think it's very fascinating that like the failure that anti-design was seen as, right? It was, you look at stuff that's popular now, like ugly reigns supreme right now.
Yeah.
Like, and it's so fascinating to me that like people are interested in, I want it to look terrible. I want it to be illegible. I want it to look gross.
Yeah.
And I love that. I honestly really do.
Well, and to me, I'm also reading it as like a rejection of how polished corporate,
Oh my
like
God,
everything is so on brand all the time to the point that
Absolutely.
like it almost feels like I
Fake.
have this conversation with students all the time about Portland State and green, and like,
oh, interesting.
yeah, like we've evolved into this world where everything has to be green if it's the brand, and
Right.
even like 15 years ago that wasn't the case, and that the omnipresence, the like, it almost feels like it's so stifling everything that comes out of these kind of corporate spaces that you have to create that if you are not in it, you have to just like explode and be
like so different, like so anti,
which is so beautiful.
It is, and we're seeing this on Instagram comes to mind because like we were there when Instagram started. Okay, look,
playing around with those great filters.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. So many filters, so little time. And it used to just be like you upload pictures of your life.
Yeah.
And now I've seen people that are like, here's a photo dump of my month, and I'm like, and the culture around this, and I'm seeing is people are like, this is so different than what Instagram is for. And I'm like, is it? Because that's how I know it.
Yeah, that's what it was.
But it's already come back around because it went so hard into the like, if you don't have a perfect aesthetic for the grid that is your Instagram, you do not belong here.
Those
boss
like,
girls only, you know? Like
those like grid takeover things
oh my
drove
God.
me
Yes,
nuts back
totally.
in the day. Because
and I had to make some stuff like that.
Yeah,
you know?
and when you experience them in real time as a viewer, where you get like a corner of a thing that has like 3 letters.
Oh my God.
It's just,
I did that
what
once.
Is this?
I did that once because I hopped on the trend train. And I regret it. I regret it every time.
Yeah.
I look at my grid every time. I'm like, oh. Every time it's not perfectly in line. I'm like, this is trash.
Yeah. Which it is most of the time.
I know, exactly. Exactly. It's so
unless
dumb.
you're posting in 3s.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
But it is interesting to see that like things were so chaotic. Like growing up in the 90s, right? I mean, the internet 90s kids. The internet was the wild, wild west, man.
Yeah.
That shit was so insane. Like, the stuff that, like, that's why I feel like millennials are so, like, especially I'm an elder millennial, like, we're so fucked up, dude. Like, from the stuff that we saw on the internet before there were, like, actual rules.
Oh.
Wild.
There's some real spooky stuff that was on there back in the day. My
sister and I told this story to my niece and nephew who I live with, my sister and her 2 kids, and my husband and I decided to buy a house together. And so she moved from Alabama to here. And so living with children is fascinating, especially Gen Alpha, because like they don't know what an AOL disc is, obviously.
Well, so many of them don't even know what a disc is to
totally.
begin with.
And so like trying to explain to my 11-year-old niece, who is a genius, by the way, she literally codes her own games. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Yeah. She uses SQL and Python. It's wild. This is what my husband uses at Nike. Yeah. She's amazing. Anyway, so we're
setting herself up well.
Oh, man. I told her, when you take over the world, don't forget me. But so we were describing, my sister and I used to chase each other to the mailbox to get the AOL discs, that had the minutes on it, so that we could AIM our boyfriends.
Wait, so you would create new AIM accounts with these every time, 5,000 free hours, and then I assume you'd cancel when you ran out of hours? Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. And then you hear your mom like, get off the computer. I have to make a phone call. Because we all had landlines.
Yeah, it was all over phone.
I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 22.
Wow.
Yeah. So we had a very analog childhood.
Yeah.
And a very like technological adulthood. And it is fascinating to see some of that kind of change. Because we talk about, here's another topic. Talk about failure. I think it's very fascinating that age has been folded into failure.
Yeah.
And this might be chronically online take, and I'm willing to accept that. But there is a very fascinating thing that's happening with Gen Z being so inclusive, being so open, except when it comes to age.
Yeah.
Like, I have seen people literally be like, if you're past the age of 25, you're dead to me. Or like the fear of getting older is so real.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I hate to break it to you, but the majority of your life is going to be past the age of 25.
Well, that's true. But I feel like that's always been the case, though. Like, I think
it's
when
just
we
has
were
more
younger,
of a voice now.
Yeah. Now you can get that stuff out in public.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, back in our day, it was just like, there was no audience for that.
Yeah. And like, I just never remembered caring about people that were older than me. Like, I did not care. Like, but now I see so many people that are just like, millennials are the worst,
Yeah.
and it's just like, if you're a millennial, then you have no opinion.
Well, yeah, and some of that is media.
Yes, totally.
Trying to boost
genuinely
things
enjoy
with fights.
Yes, exactly. I genuinely enjoy getting older. I feel like I have so much power now, like mentally, than I used to.
I don't know if I'm there with you there.
I mean, I feel like I've always been told that, like, I'm turning 40 this year.
Oh, congratulations.
And thank you. Yes. And so I've always felt like people are like, well, by the time you're 40, you're going to be so culturally irrelevant. You're never going to know anything that's going on. And I feel like it's the absolute opposite.
No.
I feel like I've just, like, I am like the professor of pop culture now. And like, for example, my students were talking about The Matrix, like iconography, and like the things that are like, oh, that looks too much like The Matrix is kind of what I was saying. And they were like, yeah, okay. And they referenced something else. And then I was like, how many of y'all have seen The Matrix? One.
Yeah.
One of them had seen The Matrix. I was like, I can't tell if I'm ancient or if that's bad. Like,
well, I had a student actually in this very same room recording a limited run podcast called Fontroversy. Subscribe now unless it hasn't come out yet, in which case subscribe eventually.
Love that plug.
But our host revealed during that recording that they were born after 9/11.
Oh man. Yeah. When I would look at people's IDs and stuff, it's like, oh, if they were born in 2000, then I know that they're of age.
Yeah.
And just the thought of that, and I was just like, that's so upsetting.
That's a lot. That's
so upsetting.
A lot.
But
No
I think
thanks.
this idea that there's this, like, once you get past your like youth, that there is like failure involved, just by default.
Yeah.
That like your opinion is not the same. It's not seen as valid. But I also think young people deal with that too, and that people say like, you're too young, your opinion's not valid.
Yeah.
And so I feel like when you're younger, you have to deal with the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because they're basically saying like, you don't have as much experience as me because you haven't failed enough, right?
Yeah. There's just a special window when you're 28
and
where
that's
everything's
it.
perfect.
Like,
Yeah, but it is really fascinating, and I think too, in my case, to skip ahead in your story to PICA, like when I was at PICA, I stopped teaching, and I got to be a much worse designer.
Fascinating.
In part, I think because I like being around those voices of people who are in a different cultural context than me, which I get every day here.
Absolutely.
Like, it makes you better, and it makes you look at things in a different way.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Like,
it makes you look at yourself in a different way.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that can be really uncomfortable at first.
Deeply uncomfortable.
Yes. I'll tell you my very embarrassing story when I started PNCA.
Please.
And I thought that I was like, I'm so cool, I know everything. And so one of my classmates, who's amazing, they're so great, we were working on a project, and they were like, well, I'm thinking about using like BTS for this project. And I was like, what does that mean? And they were like, oh, it's like a K-pop band. And I was like, don't you feel like you want to use something that's like a little bit more popular, like instead of something like people don't know anything about? And they just looked at me and they were like, well, I mean, it's like
they're the most popular band in the world,
literally. And I was just like, maybe you should pick something more popular. And then I went and Googled it, and I was like, oh my God, it's happened.
Yeah.
I'm out of touch.
It
was such a defining moment. I think about it all the time, and they were so nice to me about it, but I was just like, oh boy, I need to just shut my mouth and start listening. And you were talking about being around students a lot and teaching, and okay, so for people that don't know, you and I both worked at PICA. I worked after you.
Yes, I should have framed it with that.
Yes. Yeah, so you worked at PICA for how many years were you there?
I was there 3 years, which made me at that point the longest serving designer.
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
I was there for 3 years.
Yeah.
So, and then I left after that. But yes, it's so interesting because I left PICA because I wanted to work at an agency, and it was the experience I really wanted. I was like, I feel like I need to have this in my repertoire so that I can understand this culture in design as well.
Yeah.
That was a year and a half ago. And I have been trying to get a job in an agency since. And I've redone my portfolio so many times, and really had to stop and think like, okay, I'm not landing on this. What is my fault in this? Like, how do I fix this? Because it's not like I'm trying to get any graphic design job.
Yeah.
And so when you have this one specific thing you're trying to do, it really does take more time, and it kind of limits you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's such a chaotic time.
Oh my God,
I feel
yes.
like in advertising especially.
Oh my God, yes. And I got this amazing opportunity to work at PNCA for their, I did their lookbook for the school.
Which is very good.
Thank you. That project, I learned so much on that project too. And then Leslie from PICA, see,
yes,
I can't say the words right.
The marketing director.
Yes, Leslie DJ. Oh my God,
yeah.
she is so epic. I love her. I think about it like I owe my career to her basically, because she hired me at PICA. She didn't know who I was, but then she was like, hey, have you thought about teaching? And I was like, I just don't know if I want to get in that avenue, like blah, blah, blah. And it felt at the time, because I'd had so many rejections from this particular world, and I was watching other people succeed, that I was like, this feels a little bit too like those who can't do teach.
Ooh.
And so I was like, yeah. And so I was like, is that, and my sister, who is an educator, but for like K through 12, and she was like, I'm gonna stop you right there. like she really came through and was like,
damn.
Is that what you think about me? And I was like, no, because this is what you do. Like, you're good at this. And she was like, I think you might be underestimating the role that being a professor and teaching would play in your own skill set.
Yeah.
And because she was like, because we joke about like listening to, she homeschools my niece and nephew, and like they're smarter than us. And so like we listen to them. She talks about stuff like she's teaching, and I'm like, man, I don't remember any of that from middle school. Like, but she does all the time because she's teaching it. And so, you don't need to, she can convert tablespoons to gallons in 2 seconds, And so I just have to ask her and she can do it for me. Like,
yeah.
But what you were saying about it makes you better, I can't even tell you how much of a better designer I am now.
Yeah.
And for all the times that you think, oh, I'm just going to do this career because I feel like I failed at something or I haven't gotten to this point. Because sometimes I feel like my entire career feels like all I do is fail. But that's just a perspective, right? And if you flip that perspective over and you look at it in a way that's like, maybe this just needed to happen to me first.
Yeah.
And before I get to this other place in time that I think is success. But that's just my opinion of success. And if I start looking at what makes me a successful designer, like I'm adaptable, I can still learn, and like being around my students, like if you're going to teach something, boy, you better know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Because like they're going to find questions that you've never thought of.
Yeah.
I'm always impressed at what my students can do to InDesign. And I'm like, I have no idea how you did this.
Yeah. There's still mysteries in that program that I've yet to unravel.
Oh my God. Same. But like, you really do have to know what you're doing when you're teaching, and it's made me like, it gives you a perspective on yourself, because it's just like I have 26 people in my typography class, and it's just like 26 little mirrors of yourself in the good and the bad.
Absolutely.
And so like the things that I see about myself that I'm like, oh, I'm doing this great. And then also like, if I have a class of 26 people and all of them are struggling with something, then that's on me, right? Like it's my responsibility to be like, okay, obviously my communication on this was not great. Yeah. And then being able to listen to my students and be like, okay, how can we adapt and do this better for the next round?
Yeah.
And that kind of experience, like, boy, does it keep you humble.
Yeah.
Oh my God. In a good way, like in such a good way. But it also gives you amazing skill set, and being able to adapt and work on the fly and like talk to people. And like, I have no fear of people watching me work. Even though I mess up all the time, or like I can't spell stuff sometimes, and I'm like, I promise I'm not stupid, I'm just panicking.
Well, I used to put a lot of pressure on myself, especially in the page layout class, which you also teach, about like doing demos good, which is a really tricky thing, because you are trying to demonstrate how the program works, and you're trying to make a design without making a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And
field questions.
Yeah. And I think there's another component of it, which I didn't realize until like maybe 2 or 3 years in, which is also you're trying to make it not intimidating.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
Like and
design is very intimidating.
I would sometimes focus so much on like making it good that I would make it intimidating.
Totally.
And then folks would be like, I can't do that on the first try exactly the way that you did it. And like, so like it got to the point where I would intentionally make the design maybe bad.
Yeah.
and
That's
like
smart,
that
though.
helped.
That's smart.
It really helped.
That is so smart. That's a good idea. I'm actually going to steal that too.
Yeah. You can do better than me. Look what I did.
Exactly.
It sucks.
Oh, so many of my students are better than me. But that's the thing. Like I'm learning from that too. Also, like I let them watch me work a lot. I learned so much from watching Bijan work. There were times where I would literally be like, can I just sit behind you? And I would sit behind him while he was working on something else. And I would be like, wait a minute, how did you do that? And I learned hotkeys from that. And like, it made me so much faster because he was working faster.
Yeah.
And I tell my students this all the time. I'm like, the faster you work, the more of your life you can live away from your computer. So I had another teacher that used to say, make bigger moves faster. And that's always stuck with me. Like being able to like ideate quickly and have like major variation in that. And
you got to do it at the beginning.
Yes.
It can't be something that you are shafting off to the very end.
No. And
shunting?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's shunting.
Shunting. So inappropriate. Yeah, no, absolutely. And
I'm just talking about shaft.
We're just talking about shafting.
Can you dig it? What's the rest of that song about? I don't know.
I think there's something very interesting about being in a place as a sophomore or a freshman and having failure be the goal.
Yeah.
And which can be very difficult when, just in America, we also have grades, like we also have to have grades.
Such an annoying.
It is.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not from this kind of work. It is so stuck to like science and math. And
yes, so much.
Things where there are right and wrong answers.
And we had several times when I was at PNCA where we had exchange students, and they would just be like, how do y'all function doing this? Like, so it's another really interesting perspective. But when the first like assignment we did in my typography class in PNCA was called the 100 Views of Edo. And it was my teacher basically also taught you page layout. And so the 100 Views of Edo, which were at the Portland Art Museum recently, which was so cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so cool. It's prints by a Japanese printmaker from like I'm going to get the date wrong, so I'm not going to say it. A long time ago. Yeah. And so we had to make 100 layouts that went alongside the images, and he gave us type to use, and we had to do variations of that.
Oh shit!
But you had to do like 20 per each one. So by the end, I literally had 1,500 pages for this 200-page book. It was wild.
That's a lot.
And oh my God, I hated that project at the time because every class we had to have like 20 of them. We had to have them printed off and posted for critique. And looking back, though, it is one of those assignments that made me hands down better. I still do it to this day. I do a different version of it for my students. This is totally credit to David, my teacher, David Chattis. But I do a variation of it now for like drills to like show different how you can make variations faster and how you can make like big moves faster. But it is one of those projects that like you just have to fail a lot at it in order to get better. And so having a grade connected to that can be like really tricky. But now I do it for like bonus points for my students, so there's not like a grade attached to it. But it's so that they can learn to just fail over and over and over again until something works. And then you're like, oh, I made that was a mistake. It's just it's a happy accident that happened. I'm like, no, that's what experimentation is. You do it enough to where like your subconscious brain and your conscious brain are working together. And I feel like those kinds of things are so important because it keeps us from being too afraid of failure, and we start to see failure as a companion and not something to fear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really it's such a big thing to think about. So you after PNCA, you actually worked at PNCA for a while there too.
Yeah, that was when I did the book.
That was when you did the lookbook.
The lookbook. Yeah.
But you moved into a role at, again, my former employer and yours, Portland. It would be weird if it wasn't your former employer and I was bringing it up.
I know. I did. I got that job my junior year.
Yeah. And PICA is a lot. PICA is a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff.
They have a quite large festival.
Oh yeah, TBA.
Yes, the Time-Based Art Festival, which I believe one of the things that I'd love to do there was suss out the history of certain things. And I'm fairly sure that Christy Edmonds did name it TBA just because she didn't really know what it was yet. Because I think the original press release just calls it TBA.
But I kind of love that. I love that kind of stuff.
It's a backronym, but a great backronym.
Did you know that Marina Abramovich was a part of TBA?
Yes, I did.
That's amazing.
Well, I used to.
So
one of the things that I would love on when we did mailings was her name would always be top of the mailing list. And I would think about like, wow, my work is getting to Marina Abramovic. And then I would think about, wow, Marina Abramovic is definitely going to throw away my work immediately upon seeing and not even look at it or open it.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh, well.
It's fine.
Yeah.
She perceived your work and that's all that matters.
Or one of her assistants, probably.
Yes, probably.
Whoever was checking her mail that day. Yeah. Marina Abramovic's mailman, though, really had to spend some time parsing the address on
Totally.
it.
I remember getting an email from Miranda July. Because she was also a part of it, and she was like, "Hey, I'm looking for this," and Leslie and I were just like, "Oh my God, like that's so amazing!"
Hopefully, it's not one of those things that's just on a mini DV tape. Because oh boy,
oh my God, you talked about the archive there. No, it took us so long to find it.
You got to get out the ye olde computer.
We did though. We found it, but it took a minute. Yep, PICA is another fascinating cultural moment, right? Because it's a nonprofit, and there's a lot of cultural shifts that happened there, after or before I got there. And, going through 2020 there was pretty insane.
Yeah. You all had to reinvent. I mean, TBA before is it's like a 25,000 person international festival where people are packed in and, in
great
different
parties.
venues
So
around
fun.
the city.
Yeah.
To imagine what that looks like in a not physical format, I imagine must have been quite a challenge.
It was so crazy.
Yeah.
I graduated in 2020, and so I feel like I lost a lot of opportunities because I never got an internship because there was nobody.
Yeah,
none of us did.
just exploded.
Yeah. At PNCA thesis is a really big deal, and you do it for a year, and it's kind of like our version of Fresh, like PSU has Fresh.
Yeah.
And I spent the better part of a year working on a project, and I had to redo it in 3 weeks because my project was a performance, and I was working with a local musician, and she was going to be singing, and I was doing digital projection mapping.
Oh God!
And then it mixed, and so then we had to record everything and mix it and all of that in 3 weeks. It was wild.
Well, that recording and mixing things—that's only a little bit more work, right? That's not a huge extra lift on top of the thing.
Oh my God! It sure did teach me a lot about pivoting, and so the biggest pivot of my whole life. But at
you're
PICA,
doing that
we did
while
too.
you're working at PICA.
Yes.
Oh God.
And so every project I had been working on for a year, all of a sudden fell apart.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where Leslie and I just we're looking at each other and we're like, we don't have a choice. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out. The best way we can approach this is we're going to be sad about it for a minute, and then we're going to tackle it like it's a challenge. And we did, and it was so crazy. It was so crazy. But I honestly think it was the best version of what we could have done at the time. But we went from having 100 plus volunteers, and it was me and 2 other designers, to it being me and Leslie.
Yeah.
And then obviously the other people
what it
that
was.
But,
I mean, in my day, it was always just me and the marketing director.
That's insane.
But yeah, there's a lot of floating parts and pieces with TBA. You are this design role. You are, especially when you have the other designers, you've got people reporting to you, and you're trying to get all these different print publications and websites and other pieces of collateral that. There are so many of.
So many. I mean,
so many weird, unexpected chunks of
That's
work.
why. Oh my God, yes. That's why I feel like PICA is such great experience, especially for new designers.
Yeah.
Because first of all, I didn't know any different. right? I was like, this is
just
fine.
how it is.
Yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, normally you're making 3 print
Right?
publications at the
One
same time.
One person's always doing this amount of work.
Absolutely.
The life of a nonprofit. But also, like, you do like environmental design, you do like wayfinding, you do print material
in venues that you've never been to before, have no idea how the house is going to work.
Nope. And like, but boy, did I get great experience. The first time that they took me into the warehouse when we were doing something and I was working with an artist and like listening to the artist talk about what they wanted for, like, you know, when you walk in and you see, here's the exhibit, here's the paragraph of information on the wall, here's the name. And they were like, well, I want it to be like this. This is about the size that I want. And like Leslie is sitting there and I'm just like, am I supposed to know how to do this? I just remember just like the wave of panic of being like, oh, I've made a mistake. Like,
well, even that's, I feel like, uncommon, that level of
but
Leslie,
she has her master's,
yes.
and she hangs her own work all the time, and so is very used to that and taught me so much about, like, okay, we're going to take a picture of this wall and then we're going to use that as a mock-up, and then you're going to put the type on the wall in the mock-up so that you kind of get an idea of how it's supposed to look, and then we're going to do the math about ratios and figure out what size our document needs to be. And let me tell you something. If somebody had told me to do that on my own without her help or die, I would have died. So she taught me a lot.
Yeah, you would have had the classic first approach at vinyl, which is either really, really tiny or
massive,
so big that it's like, this is going to take a year.
Because you're a
nonprofit,
hang up. You don't get a test print, man.
No.
You get one shot. And it did actually, it's funny though, because that awareness of the relationship of ratios made me realize how bad I was at the grid. And I was like, oh wait, I kind of get this now. That like the grid is about a ratio, and so now I teach this. Now this is how I teach how to do the grid, and because I've taught the Design 200 and 300 for page layout, and yeah, it's amazing what experience you can fold in to understanding something that you really thought you already knew.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to like get new experiences and do things. One of the things I always tell my students is like, I want you to be inspired by something other than other people's work.
Please.
And so like they're not allowed to put too much of other people's work on a mood board. Yeah. Like I'm like, I want to see a texture from nature.
Yeah.
I want to see a weird hat. You know, like
and that also gets into like when you are just, I mean, and I think this was my problem when I was there. I was just living in design.
Yeah,
I would come every weekend and work on projects because I was so behind constantly.
Always.
And I think that's a big part too of why I got worse is like I was not experiencing other 100%. Things.
And this is one of those things I also like give Bijan credit for, because he would literally be like, he gave me some of the best advice I've ever gotten. And some people like give me shit for being such a stan of Fisk, but like I don't care. Like this goes to being like, people think that I'm enthusiastic and somehow that means it's like, oh, that's weird. I'm like, no, I know that Fisk is amazing. But he gave me some really great advice that like, he was like, if you're only taking in design work, you're never going to be better than something that's already been done.
Yeah.
And you're only looking at something that's already been done. He was like, you don't have the skill of being able to be inspired by something and create something based off of what you like and what you want and what you think those influences should be. And man, my little like junior brain just exploded. And I was just like, oh my God, you're right.
The skill set comes from design, but the solution comes from somewhere else.
Oh my God, put that on a fucking pillowcase, man.
Put that on Batman's wall.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's right. It's so true. The other thing he told me, because he was like, because I didn't know how to work properly. Like you said, like I was working every weekend. I was so burned out.
Yeah.
I never had a chance. I never gave myself the chance to experience other things and like go to show openings and like all that kind of stuff. And he was like, he was like, you are headed towards burnout before you even start. Yeah. And he was like, I'm going to give you some advice. And I'd say this to my students. I say this to everybody. He was like, you need to be putting in a solid 85% all the time.
Yeah.
Not 100%.
Yeah. And like, even like to work at a nonprofit is such a mission-driven job, and you really have to believe.
Oh my God, we talked about this.
Wholly in the mission.
No, I reject that.
To the point that I was even making offerings to the weird PICA.
Oh, yes.
What is his name?
Oh.
Do you remember? I can't remember
They're
for
gonna
the life
kill me.
of me.
They're gonna
but
kill
it is
me
a
for,
weird.
It's not Bruno. It's something like that.
No,
They're
it's
gonna
not,
kill
it
me
is,
for not
it's
remembering.
like a guy's name,
Yeah.
but it is like a weird little a little creature.
It is.
He's just a little guy.
And there's like an altar to him.
They have made offerings to him every time they've done like major projects.
Totally.
I've made offerings to him.
Same, I do too.
And
I love me an altar moment though.
It like is really, but I think it's also like part and parcel of like you're in this mode where everybody is coming together to make the show happen, and you are part of this, and it is so hard to
uncouple that,
and even when you absolutely need it.
Yes, because the idea that like the message cannot be currency.
Yeah.
Like the concept of these things is not currency. And so having the whole like, oh, well, you have to believe in this enough to override your own basic needs is never going to be something that I would tell people to do.
No.
Like you can believe in something with boundaries. And
you have to.
Yeah. And that's one of those things like I feel like I really was so lucky to start when Leslie started because we started at the same time and she had boundaries, man.
Yeah.
And she taught me a lot about that too.
Yeah. And she'd been in that role too. She was my immediate successor. Had to deal with my weird files.
Oh my God, no, we loved your files. Are you kidding me? You're the most organized person in the world.
No.
We would always just be like, thank you, Sean, in the middle. Like, I'd never even met you at that time, but we would be looking for something and it'd be like in your files. And it'd be like, oh my God, thank you, Sean. So no, you did great.
You're very kind.
But it's true. Like, if you're going 100% all the time, the times when people need more from you, you're going to overextend yourself so much.
Yeah.
And then if you're always at 85%, you're doing great, you're doing all these things, but you have enough of that percentage for your life.
Yeah.
And then if somebody needs something from you, you can kick it to 100 if you need to, but you just don't live there.
No,
right?
You can't.
And that really did change. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I get this. Like these pieces are coming together. And it was my own, because I was coming off of the failure of PSU, I way overcompensated and was like, I must be perfect at everything in order to make up for the fact that I failed. Which is terrible.
Only disasters come from
disaster.
That.
And so my second sophomore year there was also just so ridiculous because I was running from my fear of this failure, and I was running from, I needed to prove myself to myself and to other people that I was worth a damn because of this. And, because you can tie up too much of your own self-worth in your job. And I had people that were like, I was working so hard and I was working full time still. And you talk about overextending yourself.
That's a great way to do it. That's
Dude,
like a for sure way to do it.
I did, PNCA has this thing called Make the Code, which is really cool. And you can get like a math and science credit through their workshops. And so I was like, oh, I'm doing that. And you learn a lot of coding and stuff like that. And so I did that. But the workshops were like in the mornings on the weekends, and I bartended. And so Fridays, I would go into work at like 9:00 at night, and I would get off work at like 4 a.m. And then I would go to the workshop at 9 a.m. and I would do the workshop until 5 o'clock. And then I would go to work at 7 p.m. and work until 5 a.m. and then go to the workshop at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Yeah. So I had a great time in college. Don't do that.
No.
I also feel like that, again, with the age, feeling like failure sometimes, that I was also always trying to prove that I was still running from the fact that I made this decision later in life. And there's a lot of really amazing pros and cons to going to school when you're older. Yeah. And it does give you a better perspective on what's important, and it's okay to get a B sometimes, It
really is.
And I didn't love that, but there were times that I had to be like, all right, I do have to sleep at some point.
That's much more important in both the short and the long term. Oh my God.
But the cons are that you do feel behind kind of constantly, and there are people that are my age that have been in this for a decade now, and I'm just starting out, and that's why I always feel like a little bit behind in life. But it also, my friends that are going through major midlife crises, that are like, oh, I'm so tired of my job. I'm like, I'm having a great time. So there is a pro to that too. I'm like, I'm just getting started.
Mallory, it's been such a joy to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If people want to find more about your work and what you're doing now, where do they go? Where do they look?
I am old school, and so I have an Instagram, Mallary Designs, and my name is Mallary.
Yes.
And then my website is the same, MalloryDesigns.com.
It's easy to remember.
Yeah, MalloryDesigns.com.
I always love it when you get URLs that are easy to remember.
I just did Mallory Design because I was uncreative and didn't want to come up with a name, and then it just stuck.
Does what it says on the tin, though.
Yes, it does.
Ultimately. Well, thank you.
Thank you so
again.
much for this. It's so fun.
It's such a joy having you here. And also, hey, listener, I'm talking to you now, the person on the receiving end of this audio. You're listening, and that means thanks to you because you like this. Wow, this is really bad.
Doing such a good job. So good. Crushing it.
True.
How to come back from failure.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I turn this around? Well, if this show sounds like it's something that is right up your alley, why not rate, review, and subscribe to it on whatever service that you use to listen to podcasts? Apple Podcasts is a great place also to leave a rating or review. I check that pretty regularly. I don't know how to do that on other platforms. So if there's comments there, please send them along to me because I'd love to see them, unless they're bad, in which case you can send them straight to hell. Even better, though, than all those things, you could tell a friend about this show. Like I said, we're right here at the start of season 3, the shittiest season, unfortunately.
Thanks. I feel so special.
Yikes. You can follow the show on Instagram, not Twitter anymore. Don't go to Twitter at all, especially not for me, because I won't be there. Just going to leave that to the wolves. And also, you can follow the show on YouTube at dididothat.design, which is also another place so you can listen to episodes. Hey, dididothat.design, that's our website. Go there. Watch, by which I mean listen to different episodes to your heart's content and enjoy the website that I built. Anyway, I really turned that around. It came out real good.
Crushing it.
Such a positive voice. This has been Did I Do That? I'm Sean Schumacher. And as we always say at the end of every episode...
Oh no, I'm panicking.
Oh no, I'm panicking. Okay, bye.
Can you swear on this podcast?
Swear to your heart's
Okay,
content.
great.
Yes.
I genuinely do not mean to swear as much as I do. And I've really had to be aware of that as a teacher. But, I was a bartender for too many years. I feel like I was born swearing. I just came out of the womb just like, fuck.
Well, in fairness, that's a rough go. I don't, just born babies, I feel like are often purple and just like, fuck.
Yeah, I was breached too. I came out butt first, so.
As rough a time as it
Yep.
gets.
Talk about failure. Started ass up. Anyways, you want to talk about graphic design?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not even kidding. My friends and I in high school, because there's nothing to do, we used to drive out to the cornfields and watch them burn the fields. Yeah. Yes, in case you ever thought I was cool.
What?
But my friends and I used to drive out there and sit on the hood of our car and watch the fucking fields burn like it's entertainment. This was before we had a lot of internet access.
That feels like a post-apocalyptic version of late 80s, early 90s trope of driving out to the end of an airport ramp.
Oh my God, yes.
Having the planes go over as you're sitting on your car.
When you're 17, it feels very romantic and cool.
Yeah.
Like Ethel Cain vibes, she would love that. But looking back, I'm just like, oh my God.
Pesticides.
I mean, just yes. Oh my God, totally.